State Auditor Pat McCarthy's office issued a 26 cybersecurity audit report titled Continuing Opportunities to Improve State IT Security. Per the Seattle Times, it warned that state agency computer systems and data may quote-unquote attractive targets for cyber attacks. Per the Seattle Times, the next day on Christmas, unknown actors compromised the auditor's own computer files, exposing a vast trove of private information in what may be the largest ever cyber breach for a Washington state agency. The data included driver's license, social security, bank account numbers, and more for more than 1.4 million unemployment claimants. It also included audit data involving 25 state agencies and 100 local governments, including the city of Seattle, as well as adoption files of 30 children and their families. The Christmas Day breach has created massive problems for the agency and frustration and anger for those whose data was stolen. Many say they learned of the breach only through media accounts and are frustrated by the lack of information from the auditor. And that's your news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
On Rainier Avenue Radio.world, look for the Change Your Food, Change Your Life show. I'm Dennis Weaver, your good food guide and host, helping you to feel good and look good, and who wouldn't want some of that? All that and more from the Change Your Food, Change Your Life show on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Stories, songs, and guests. Begin living the organic good food life, and the rest of your life just may be the best of your life. Always up, baby, to your help.
Dealing with COVID-19 is uncharted territory, and everyone has different challenges. People may feel anxious, down, or overwhelmed. For some, these feelings can lead to changes in sleep patterns, an increased use of alcohol or drugs, or withdrawing from the people around them. If you know someone who's having a hard time coping, you can help by reaching out to talk and listen. To learn more about how you can help someone in need, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-TALK. Brought to you by the state of Washington.
On Saturday, February 27th, Seattle Local Learning Center, a nonprofit, A for Apple Learning Center, will spread the warmth by giving away new winter coats and books to children. We know that warmth is created in more than one way. A warm coat brings physical warmth, the gift of community brings warmth to our spirit, and the knowledge that someone cares brings warmth to the heart. A for Apple Learning Center has served the community for over 25 years and is dedicated to supporting and connecting families to essential resources in our community.
You probably have questions about COVID vaccines. Here are some answers about how they're being made.
How are COVID vaccines being produced faster?
Usually, vaccine testing and production are separate steps. But because of the pandemic, vaccines are being developed on parallel tracks. So both steps are happening just at the same time.
How are the vaccines being tested?
Right now, several different COVID vaccines are in testing. Each go through multiple clinical trials with up to thousands of volunteers.
How do vaccines get approved?
Not all COVID vaccine versions will make it to the final stages of testing and approval. Produced vaccines that do not pass clinical trials will be destroyed. But for those that do pass, a team of medical experts will examine test results and possible side effects. If the vaccine is effective and safe, it gets approved and gets to you. Go to covidvaccinewa.org to learn more. A message from the state of Washington.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Check us out on social media, Facebook and Instagram, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, and on Twitter at Rainier Ave Radio.
Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. It's me, your host, Tony B. This is our special broadcast that we do every Friday of the impact of the coronavirus on South Seattle and surrounding communities. Again, if we just wanted to talk about the coronavirus and all of the things directly associated with the coronavirus, we'd still have a whole lot to talk about, a lot to share with you. There's potentially another vaccine on the way. I think that we're going to find out today whether this Johnson & Johnson vaccine gets approved or not. AstraZeneca's on the way. There's evidently more vaccine out now. There's been a shortage of that. There's certainly a committed effort to provide people with information. I think, I could be wrong, tell me I'm wrong too, about why they want you to take the vaccine. And I think there's a better understanding now because of that effort as to why some people choose not to take the vaccine. And people get to make their own choices. Everyone should make their own choice about that. The point is this is all coronavirus related stuff. The thing about it, though, is coronavirus impacted everything. You remember things shut down, so it impacted education. It impacted childcare. It impacted businesses. People lost lives. Immediately, one of the things that happened was it exposed the nuanced systemic oppression. There's the big oppression that everybody sees, but it exposed the nuanced systemic oppression. Immediately, there was discrimination. Asians in our community were discriminated against. So there's a lot of things that this virus has done. So when we have shows, they're not always directly about the virus, but they will be and can be. Joining me right now, a little bit later, will be Lisa Judge from the Inspector General. We'll find out more about what that means and what it is that she does as Inspector General. Eugenie Jones will be here to talk with us about the Jackson Street Jazz Walk, which is going to take place again this year. And if you're unfamiliar with the history of Jackson Street and its impact on, well, worldwide culture, is essentially what it boils down to. But the jazz scene here was really hopping at one time, and and still is, but in a bigger way, at least on a world stage, and the opportunities to perform. I mean, right now no one can perform, but so that's going to be taking place. And joining me will be King County Councilmember Girmay Zahilay. So we've got a lot to get to, and we got a number of. We've been celebrating Black History Month all month long, and it's just been incredible. You can go back to our website and you can take a look at some of the things that we've done. Tonight's Friday Family Film Night, and so there will be a live panel discussion about equity or lack thereof in the Seattle film industry. This will be moderated by Anthony Tackett. It's got a bunch of people on the panel too. Just a good lineup, and you can take part in it. You can participate by registering in Zoom and being part of this conversation, or you can just call in like you normally would. So that's at 6:00 tonight. That'll be followed by the films that we're showing. Anthony's going to be showing his film Black June. It's just a preview. He chronicled following May 30th when the riots began taking place. And this will be the first time he's kind of shown what he's done. So you don't want to miss that. A lot of other things. We've got the Hartsfield Quilt Collection, slave quilts. Again, that will happen at 5:00. We've got interviews that we've done by Northwest Legacy Pioneers. Bob Lovelace, we're going to play part of his performance, which is part of Black History Month. So just a lot of stuff. And then tomorrow, XP. Is that right, Daniel? XP, or is it Experience? Is it both? Okay. Hip hop artist XP or Experience will be performing, and OG Squeak Nutty Bug will be performing live from the historic Columbia City Theater at noon to 1. This will be also hosted by another pioneering legend of the Emerald Street Boys, R. Curtis. So that we've tried to give you a well-rounded Black History Month. We've done race and social justice issues. We've talked about transgender issues. We've talked about family issues. We talked about financial issues. I could go on and on and on. We talked about being Black and playing football. We've covered a lot. And we've also had town hall meetings, and because that's part of what happens when at least when we do Black History Month, we try to give you a comprehensive overview of the Black experience. So you see heroes and sheroes and businesses and talent, arts, a lot of different things. So today, my guest will be King County Councilmember Girmay Zahilay. Councilmember Zahilay, how are you?
I'm doing well, sir. How about yourself?
Under the circumstances, fantastic.
Always good to see my fellow Quaker.
I do have to, say to you, congratulations. You've become part of history. Holding the position that you hold, running for office, doing the things that you do. So congratulations, young man, on becoming part of Black history.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
So I want to talk about ultimately for folks who are joining us who's like, hey, we're getting an update on violence in Safeway. I'll even go back and tell people what that's about. But I want to start off by talking with you. It's been 1 year now. And we started about this time last year. We had a conversation, and you were facing at that time the unknown pandemic, the unknown crisis. And here we are a year later. Not that we know a whole lot more, but we know more than we knew at that particular time. So how has this last year been for you? Just in whatever it be, personal as King, and we want to know about that if you feel like sharing. As a King County Council member, what can you share? Because we haven't been able to sit in those meetings with you. We haven't been able to be part of that sphere of influence for a lot of folks. And for a lot of people, they probably feel like, Councilmember Zahilay is about the best way we can get access, to those things that, again, we understand why some of them may happen. That's why you elect officials. But personally, too. So whatever you feel, how has the last year been for you?
It's been crazy, Tony. I'll give you one day that was a perfect example. Sometime last March of 2020, almost exactly a year ago now, the governor, for the first time, came down with his stay-at-home order, and that was to limit gatherings, and it also had the effect of closing down a lot of small businesses. And on that one day in March, suddenly my email was just flooded with people telling me their stories of struggle. People were saying that, hey, I've been building my restaurant for a couple generations, and now it's going to go under because of this virus. I've been laid off. My kids can no longer go to school because schools are shut down and they don't have anywhere to go, anything to do. We don't have babysitters. I don't have enough money to pay the rent. I'm about to be evicted and fall into homelessness. So all at once, thousands of people in King County were channeling their struggles towards me digitally. And that was really hard. I would say that was probably the hardest day of my professional and personal life. Just to,
did you have any regrets? Did you, at that point, did you feel like, well, I didn't sign up for this?
I didn't have regrets, no, Tony, because this is my community. As you know, I grew up in the South End. I grew up in Rainier Vista, New Holly, and Skyway. And so being in this position is of great privilege during a time like this, because this is the biggest opportunity that I have to support my community during their greatest struggle. So no, I didn't have regrets, but I definitely was really overwhelmed and had to find ways to just cope mentally, spiritually, and find time to respond to all the need that was coming towards me.
And I'm not shocked to hear you say that. Just in our conversations, I think that, my attitude about it is when people need you, that's when they need you.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And let's talk, shift here a little bit politically. Mm-hmm. What was that like? The council, runs a certain way. Then there was a pandemic. I don't know that you fully got to appreciate, without the pandemic, how the council works. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you did, but can you talk about that a little bit about, your first term during a pandemic? And I don't know if y'all met over the internet or if you just said, hey, we got to get together in person because this is what we got to do. And important issues on the table, crisis at hand.
Yeah, so a lot of our meetings were virtual. All of our council meetings suddenly became virtual just because we didn't want to pack people into the small King County courthouse downtown during a pandemic. So the job did become largely virtual, but I was still out in the community handing out masks, marching and protesting with people, connecting people to resources as much as I could, because you can't really get a sense for what people are going through over the internet. So I had to be out there in person. And also, a lot of our communities are not connected because of the digital divide. So if I just relied on social media and Zoom, I would be missing a lot of the people who need support the most. One thing that I learned, though, is how inadequate our systems are to respond to a crisis like this. And it's because of what people like you, Tony B, and many of our heroes of the past and present have been telling us for a long time. And it's that generations of unjust, unsustainable policies, especially the ones that leave the South End most vulnerable, are going to ultimately hurt us all. You know, the virus showed us more than anything else that we are so interconnected in our fates. If some people are vulnerable to this virus and are catching it, then we're all vulnerable because of how transmittable this disease is. So we need to really address the bigger systemic issues around housing, wealth inequality, jobs, education that are leaving some people more vulnerable, especially in the South End. Otherwise, our systems are just not going to be ready to respond to a virus like this, and we'll continue to struggle for future ones as well.
And you're absolutely right. And the thing about it, Councilmember Zahilay, is we knew that.
We did know that. We
knew that 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. We knew that 10 years ago. We knew that 4 years ago. Yeah, can I keep going? You know what I'm
keep saying? Going. You can keep going all the way back.
New, and there may be new players in the game, new actors in the game, new surroundings in the game. The landscape may be different, but we're not dealing with something new.
We're not.
And I can appreciate the sense of urgency that people have now. Mm-hmm. You know, and let's talk about that a little bit from your perspective, because again, and I'll say this: Girmay, Councilmember Zahilay was in the community. You can see it because you can go back and you can take a look and you can see where he was and what he was doing. Because he was out there. I don't know that other city council people weren't being productive or council members weren't being productive. We just didn't see them, you know, and maybe some folks saw some things or heard some things, but you were clearly visible during that time. So what would you say are the things that you would like to share with the community? And we're going to talk about some other stuff here. After 1 year of being where you're at. Again, we know that some things were in place. We know that it's not new. And maybe there's some people out there who made people aware of stuff, but it's not new. What would you say to people out there who are saying right now, how do we move forward so that, you know, something changes?
We move forward by adopting that mindset that you were just talking about, Tony B, which is that equity is the framework. Equity has to be the way we navigate in all of our policies. Because if we don't, and resources and access continue to go toward the people who are already wealthy and already well connected, then again, we as a society as a whole, we are going to be more vulnerable. We're going to be more unstable. So how we move forward is to take a bold approach to equity. We have to restructure our political systems so that, you know, we don't have all these barriers that inhibit funds and resources and power going to marginalized communities. One of these barriers, Tony B, is our system of districts, where our legislative branch, whether it's at the city council, King County Council, or state level, we are all incentivized to respond to the particular district that elected us, right? I'm responsive to District 2, so-and-so is responsive to District 1 through 9. But we all know that not every district is built the same in terms of equity and demographics and people who are struggling. And yet we continue as elected officials to be incentivized to respond to the people who voted for us, instead of having this overarching commitment to equity, which is we need to put resources in the places that need it most, the people who are struggling the most. And so once we're able to do that, we can start putting major investments, targeted ways toward neighborhoods like Rainier Beach and Skyway, and now South King County, because so many of our communities have been displaced into that area. So that's one thing that I think should and can change. And in that way, we can uplift the communities that are struggling the most.
Now, there are a lot of different voices out there, some of them louder than others. And if there's an issue that is rung true to you and you've decided to follow that issue, be aware of that. But the elected officials, so when I ask Councilmember Zahilay this question, it's because we've elected him. And that means, to an extent, we've placed our trust in him to make decisions. How does he make those decisions? Does he interact with us? Does he interact with those other lawmakers, those other officials? You know, that's something, as we go through this process, that you can ask for yourself. I think there are a couple of very important abilities that a elected official should have. And I'll give you 10 seconds to think about it. What are those abilities? Because they may be different to everyone. But these are the ones that I think. Mm-hmm. Availability, accessibility, and flexibility. Mm-hmm. And because if you're not accessible and you're not available and you're inflexible, it doesn't matter what you think. Mm-hmm. So moving in that direction, I'd like you to talk now about some of the things that you are happy that you have accomplished and share with our community, because it's not easy to always get these messages from our community. One of the things that I've been excited about is the proliferation and the acknowledgement of independent media and the role that we can play in our communities, in particular because of a crisis, and the fact that we super serve our communities with information. On Rainier Avenue Radio, sometimes you may not always like it, but it is the mirror that we are reflecting. Sometimes you might find it amazing and incredible. It is simply the mirror that we are reflecting.
Yes, sir. So I would say the three biggest areas of our accomplishments in year one would be around Skyway, public safety, and housing and land. Those are the three big areas. When it comes to Skyway, as you know, Tony B, as a King County council member, my jurisdiction is much bigger in unincorporated King County like Skyway. And just a few blocks south from Seattle, we have this community that has 70% people of color, the highest proportion of African Americans in the entire state of Washington, and a pretty big low income community as well. If you drive through Skyway, you feel the difference just on site alone of the lack of development and the lack of investment in that community. When you have the highest proportion of Black people in a community and the most underinvestment, together that makes systemic racism. And so that was our biggest priority when I got into office this past year, is let's make Skyway the model, the blueprint in Washington state for investing in a community without displacing or pushing out the people who call it home, because we keep getting this wrong in our state. You see it in the CD, you see it in many parts of where you operate, Tony B, around Columbia City and South Seattle, where development almost always means pushing people out. So we got some major wins for Skyway this past year. We got $10 million for a community center, $10 million for participatory budgeting, meaning the community gets to direct how those funds are spent. We got $6 million of extra public transportation, meaning we get to dramatically expand access to transit in this community. And then we also passed the Skyway sub-area plan, which means we get to lay out the zoning of this community to best prioritize the community and investment without displacing those neighborhoods. And then when it comes to
when you say we, you mean like you, the elected official?
The King County Council, that's right. The King County Council has that zoning and land use power over unincorporated King County in ways that it doesn't within the city limits of Seattle. Right. And then I'm happy to talk about public safety and the land and housing port.
Okay, let's talk about those two. But for those who are looking right now going, wow, I want to be a public official. How did you do that? Okay, you're trying to get things done and you accomplish something and you're pulling this. How did you make that happen?
I see my job as partnering with the community to get legislation across the finish line. There are already so many community members on the ground who are doing amazing work, whether that's in Skyway or South Seattle. And my job is to use my office as a tool to empower those community members in their work and get legislation across the finish line. So I was able to join marchers, protesters, join grassroots movements, and really put pressure on our governments to collaborate and put investments where the need is greatest.
All right. And so just asking you to kind of share a blueprint, because it wasn't waving a magic wand, or was it waving a magic wand?
It was not waving a magic wand. It took a lot of work and decades of work that other community members had been doing. And I was fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time when the largest movement in American history took place. And that was the Black Lives Matter movement this past year. So we were able to leverage that movement into tangible victories for our communities.
Okay. You said 3. What's another one?
So last year, we saw the Black Lives Matter movement. And one of the things that we heard was that we need to create a better system of policing, one where we don't send armed police officers to respond to every challenge in our region. We need to tailor our response. So if we see a mental health crisis on the streets, the best use of our resources is probably not to send somebody with a lethal weapon to respond in that situation. But for a long time, the King County Council was not able to implement changes like that because we had a constitutional barrier. Our King County charter prevented us from changing the duties of our King County Sheriff's Office. So my office put Charter Amendment number 6 on the ballot. So many of you who voted this past year, when you opened up your ballot and saw things like your next president, you also voted on the charter amendments, and Charter Amendment 6 passed on the ballot. So now the King County Council can implement those changes, and we're working with the stakeholders, the people who are in the King County Sheriff's Office service areas, to get their feedback and really implement a better system of public safety. So this is really a fundamental and almost revolutionary change in our system of policing in King County, and that came because of all the movements this past year.
All right. And number 3, or these are the 3 biggest, maybe more than that, but these are the 3.
These are just 3 of the biggest, but happy to share more. Another thing that is a big priority for me is using our land and existing buildings more effectively to provide housing and community centers and facilities for people in the South End and Skyway. And so right when I got into office, I sat down with our King County assessor and I asked him, where is our underutilized publicly owned land? And can we transfer that to community organizations for things like housing and community facilities? And he was really helpful. This is King County Assessor John Arthur Wilson. And one example of this is we identified 2 plots of land next to the Columbia City Light Rail Station that were just sitting there fenced off, unused. I'm sure, Tony B., if you get off at the Columbia City Light Rail Station, you look around, there's just properties there that are not going to any use. So we worked with him, we worked with the University of Washington and 3 community organizations to partner up with Sound Transit, get those lands transferred to Black-led community organizations. And now we're going to be building something in Columbia City called the Youth Achievement Center, which is housing and resources co-located together for South Seattle youth who are housing unstable or impacted by our criminal justice system. And that's just one example of this movement for transferring land and buildings to our community-based organizations for housing and facilities. And we have a bigger master plan around that I'm really excited to push on this year.
And again, just for clarity, when you say we, at this, is it you taking King County Council again, or when you say we, who's we?
In this case, I'm talking about my office. We operate as a team. So we and me and my teammates want to keep pushing this initiative.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it.
What, that's just me. Other people can think what they want to think. I appreciate you having this conversation with me so folks can decide for themselves whether they see those as accomplishments or not. Or, it's
yes, sir.
Part of what it is. And everybody has different agendas. And so, but again, you always show up, well, for the most part, When I asked
we had that one time, Tony B. We can talk about it some more.
and we will. We're gonna go to break here, and we're gonna give you an update on what's been happening in Rainier Beach. Again, this is not something that started 2 weeks ago. It's not something that started 5 months ago. It's not something that started 2 years ago. So it's again not new, but it continues to happen. And the pandemic did not help. We're going to be back to talk about the violence in Rainier Beach, what some of the solutions are that are being discussed. I can talk specifically about since we had an initial town hall meeting. We'll continue to have this conversation. We'll be back and we'll talk more with King County Councilmember Girmay, Zahilay, when we get back right after this. Rainier Avenue Radio.
The 7th annual Jackson Street Jazz Walks virtual concert will be held February 27th and 28th at 7 p.m. It's free to the public with all donations benefiting the Central Area Senior Center. Join us for the Delvon Lamar Organ Trio, Eugenie Jones, Alex Dugdale, the Devon and Donovan Lewis Drumoff, and more. For more information, please visit jacksonstreetjazz.org. That's www.jacksonstreetjazz.org.
Atlantic Street Center has been serving the children, youth, and families of the Seattle-King County area since 1910. We partner with families and communities to raise healthy, successful children and youth through services including counseling, early learning, youth development, domestic violence, and education support for school-aged children. Committed to serving the African-American community, Atlantic Street Center provides services and support for all marginalized people. Learn more at AtlanticStreetCenter.org.
Kind of nonsense conversation are we having here?
The Neon Ghost Show. The Neon Ghost Show. Right here on Rainier... what's it? Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Right about now.
Rainier Avenue Radio.world. I'm so tired. I have to pee.
This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio. All counties in Washington state have now advanced to phase 2 of the Healthy Washington Reopening Plan after a data error was corrected that was keeping one region held back. Per King 5 News, the DOH said it discovered Providence St. Mary Medical Center in Walla Walla was reporting COVID-19 hospital admission data incorrectly, which made it so that South Central region did not get the green light to move to phase 2 along with the other regions in the state. The Department of Health said once it was made aware of the data error, state health officials stepped in to help correct it. In phase 2, a maximum of 5 people from outside of a person's household can gather indoors, and indoor dining is available at 25% capacity until 11 p.m., among other changes. Indoor fitness centers can open at 25% capacity. And that's your news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Don't forget to log on www.RainierAvenueRadio.world.
Welcome back to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. As Councilmember Zahilay mentioned, you're hearing a conversation between two Franklin Quakers. So yeah, you're right. I got to share that love back. You know, we hear a lot about, but yeah, Franklin, we're proud of our school. You know, and the community that we grew up in, and there are other schools, and I take nothing away from them, but this is two Quakers right here. And you know, the cool thing about it is that there are you know, these fun rivalries. There's sometimes been intense rivalries, but it's also been a wonderful form of being able to interact, you know, within the various schools, whether it be Franklin or Cleveland or Roosevelt, and all these schools, because we all live in one city. In Rainier Beach, one of the reasons that we started Rainier Avenue Radio 4 years ago, one of the reasons that I became interested in building a community radio station in 2011 when the FCC released low power FM radio stations to communities because major market radio was no longer effectively serving communities. You know, part of that had to do with the 1995-1996 Telecommunications Act. It was okay. Well, let's after 20 years in major market radio and seeing how our community was manipulated and, you know, in the ways that they were for ratings and such, said, okay, well, let's start a community radio station, because a lot of what we hear about in South Seattle publicly and have heard about is usually crime, is usually some sort of poverty-driven messaging. So one of the reasons Rainier Avenue Radio started was to amplify the diverse voices in our community and show all of the amazing and incredible things that we do. And we have over 80 different programs broadcast by members of our community. We have a robust internship program. We have youth who have taken our coursework, which ranges in everything from communications and journalism to app design, web design. We teach math and coding classes. We teach of course, film photography and broadcast in the schools that I'm talking about: Franklin, Rainier Beach, Cleveland, Rainier Valley Leadership Academy, Meany Middle School, Mercer Middle School, Washington Middle School. We have students who have become head engineers who've taken our coursework, because if you're going to build a 21st century communications network, then you have to engage and involve youth. So it's not like, you know, we're not connected to the community. We don't have to talk about it because that's not what we're here for. So about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago at this point, there was a discussion taking place about the violence in Rainier Beach. And the messaging, you know, had said, contact Rainier Avenue Radio so that they can hear about this. They're good guys over there. And somebody reached out to me, and I responded on the thread and said, hey, sure, you know, yes, if this is an issue in the community, this is what we're here for. Turned out to be not as easy as that. So that was about 2 days later. We ended up having a town hall meeting because it was necessary. Safeway was invited. Some other folks were invited. The community was invited. And since that time, and not that this is the only thing that made that happen, just giving an update, we had another town hall meeting. Councilmember Zahilay attended that one. I asked him to attend the first one. He declined. I asked a number of people to attend the first one, and they declined. I think they declined as a group. But nobody got back to me really except Councilmember Zahilay. Well, you know, and I'm not saying that there aren't other people involved in doing things, but since that time, the community voiced its opinion. The community gave its diverse, you know, thoughts about what should happen, how they felt about that situation. And the latest thing that's happening now is that Safeway has decided to put up lights in the Rainier Beach parking lot. Although we've went through this process of understanding that the property was owned by not Safeway. Safeway, you know, has some liability for it, but all this stuff came out in the town hall meeting to the community that the community apparently wasn't aware of. Last week, we had the liquor store owner on who said he had never been contacted by anybody. So it was great to have this and have these conversations. And it's good for us to be able to report right now that Safeway is at least going to put lights in the parking lot. They're wondering what to do about the closed down pho restaurant. Again, that's not necessarily the entire answer, but at least there's been some movement. Yeah, so do we have an update, Councilmember Zahilay, on what's taking place in South Seattle, and where we're at right now? Is there something that you can share with us specifically about, you know, what got us engaged in this in the first place, which was community members saying we need to find out information, we need to hear more, we just want to be involved, we want a solution. Now, what happened, and there could be some debate over this, was some folks had a meeting and some folks could not come and weren't invited. I was asked if I could broadcast the city council meeting. I was told no, but we had our own town hall. So And then I think some people were confused about what was going on. Ultimately, what I just want to get to is if there was a meeting and things were being done, what's being done? And that's going to be good news.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony B. And I just want to clarify in saying that I was glad that you had that first town hall and I encouraged it. I know we had some disagreement about whether I should have attended that first one or not. For me, it was really just making sure that I had all the best information before I go out and talk publicly. And I didn't feel like at that point I was ready to go out with that because I hadn't aligned with the boots on the ground. And as soon as I felt like I did join your second one.
Look, there we go again with that, align with the boots on the ground, as if that was the only part of the community that you should talk to. And I say again, you're the King County Council member for all of the community. And so, I mean, maybe you can explain that to me again, and I'll let you go on, but I don't understand that. If I'm a community member, if other members of community are community members, and you say you're not sure what to say, that means you're inaccessible to us?
Absolutely not. The thing is that there are people on the ground, and I know you mentioned that there were more people on the ground who had not participated in that specific meeting. But when there are a sizable portion of the people who are boots on the ground invited me to a meeting, and I wanted to make sure that I have the best information to report out to the broader community, that was my only intent. Not to say that other voices don't matter. I will attend any meeting that people invite me to. And that's what I did with this one. It wasn't a closed meeting. It wasn't a secret meeting. It was just a particular segment of our Rainier Beach community that invited me to that meeting. And if anybody else invites me to a meeting, I'm going to go to that too.
And private individuals can do whatever they want to do. Again, I said that before, and I agree. But our elected officials have to be accountable. So what's the update? Because you know what happened at the town meeting. It was there for everybody to hear at the first. And then there was supposed to be an update that came out. We had no update. Then we had a second town hall meeting. And I'm not badgering you. I'm just saying if there was information to be, what is the information? What is the report that we're supposed to be getting? Because I'm sure we'll all be glad to hear it.
So at the moment, we're working to take an inventory of all of the existing efforts related to public safety, both specifically in that parking lot and the broader Rainier Beach neighborhood. Once we have that inventory, we're going to be better at aligning those various efforts, because all of our systems need to better communicate with one another so that we can resolve violence as soon as possible and stop it before it happens in the first place. And then we need to properly fund these violence interruption efforts. I know the city of Seattle is putting in several millions of dollars to disrupt violence. There's the city of Seattle, $14 million for the Community Safety Initiative, $30 million for participatory budgeting for community-driven safety, $30 million for an equitable communities fund to invest in that neighborhood. And then we need to also make sure that Safeway, the corporation, is part of this conversation. And that's one of the things that we've been doing as well, looping in Safeway, the corporation. I know you mentioned that Safeway is now going to be fixing the lights. We have more requests around the infrastructure of that parking lot. And then King County, I'm trying my best.
We all wanted to hear from Safeway, which is why I invited them to the meeting. And they came and they reported to the community.
That's right.
I don't understand what's so secret about that. Or they came, and now they're responding. But so that's good stuff. Are there specifics that you can tell me? Like I just said, it might be lights, but it's just lights. It's people can say this happened in the meeting. This is an outcome. What are what's happened? What are the things that you would like to share? And when you say we, who's the we?
Yeah, I'll read you the list right now, Tony B.
Okay, cool.
So the violence interruption initiatives that are taking place currently and that I met with as part of that coalition, my attendance was requested. Again, it was not a secret meeting. It was a particular coalition of people who requested my attendance, and anybody listening to this can request my attendance at any meeting and I'll show up.
And you're right. I'm just giving you the perspective of the way that it was given to me.
Absolutely.
People were saying, we can't come. We're not, I said secret meeting, because people were telling me we can't come and you can't.
Totally hear the perspective. Totally hear the perception and the perspective. So Rainier Beach Action Coalition has Rainier Beach, a beautiful, safe place for youth. That's a great initiative. They have youth diversion services. Urban Family has been part of these conversations as well. They have the Seattle Community Safety Initiative, Southeast Network Boys and Girls Club of King County. They also partner up on the Rainier Beach, A Beautiful Safe Place for Youth, the Seattle Community Safety Initiative. And then there are security efforts at Safeway as well. So the whole goal is to document and take an inventory of those on the ground community safety initiatives, specifically in that parking lot, and also take inventory of the broader resources in Rainier Beach. You know, if there's a young person who violence has been disrupted for them, can we quickly connect them to another support system to keep them housed, to keep them stable? Organizations like Creative Justice and Community Passageways have been parts of these conversations as well. Can we make sure that King County and the city of Seattle are better communicating around our responses as well? I know we have COVID-19 relief packages coming into King County. I want to make sure that resources from those relief packages are going to disrupt violence as well, because the impact of this virus is not just a public health issue. We have violence consequences from the virus as well, because if we're closing down schools, we're closing down after school facilities, people are being laid off, there's economic anxiety and emotional anxiety. All of those things are contributing to violence. So the case that I'm trying to make is that, hey, whenever we're getting COVID-19 relief packages, let's dedicate some of those resources toward boots on the ground resources, responses to disrupt violence before it happens.
Okay,
and then
so if somebody's getting the ear of our council member about where money is going to be distributed, we need to know who that is. And we need to make sure that we support that, because there are other people out there who may have ideas. And so if you're listening to people for the intention of giving them the money, and I'm not saying that that's not cool or whatever, but people have done this before and gotten it wrong. That's why we're in the position that we're in today. This is not new. And so we should know, if you're distributing money to people, what the plans are, who they are. Other people should be invited to the table. I applaud everybody who steps up. We're talking about sizable chunks of money that could benefit our neighborhood. They may not. People have gotten it wrong before, which is why we're in the position we are today. And if we get it wrong again, it's not going to benefit us for decades.
That's absolutely right.
I know that you have a limited amount of time. We got about a minute left, and I want to give you the opportunity for final words.
Thank you so much, Tony B. First of all, thank you for holding our elected officials accountable. I think having you request our attendance and report out to the community is really important part of our democracy, and I will continue to do that. And so if anybody listening to this, first of all, feels like there have been secret meetings, there have not been secret meetings. It's anytime a coalition or an organization requests my attendance as their representative, I'm going to show up. So we're going to do much broader engagement as well. Again, as the elected official, like Tony B said, private citizens can do what they want, but as the elected official, I will be responsive to the broader community. And this inventory process that we're taking is to identify all of the different stakeholders in Rainier Beach. It's not just one organization or two organizations. There are boots on the ground, there's Safeway, there's community centers, there are neighbors who are living around that neighborhood who can act as eyes and ears on the ground for us that we need to interface with. There are so many different resources and stakeholders, and that broad inventory taking process is taking place. And very soon we will have a press release. I'll hold my own joint town hall with local elected officials to bring in neighbors to voice their concerns. Thank you so much for your patience around this issue.
Cool. Thank you. And just again, really quickly, like I reported out that the lights are being built. Is there anything, you know, again, it's a big, nuanced, complex issue, but is there anything that you can say, this is one thing we're happy about? We know that you're talking to people, but that doesn't, is there anything specific that you can say this has been done? And I know there's people out there working, but a lot of us aren't part of this conversation that you're having. So I think more people, and if we're going to be giving people money, again, I guess we have your ear now, and we need to figure out what those plans are, what can be done, because we should get it right.
Absolutely. So the specifics are around the Safeway stuff you mentioned, the lights. We're trying to address the flow of traffic in that area. We're taking the inventory of all of the different responses and resources in the Rainier Beach area. The city of Seattle has invested several millions of dollars in community safety initiatives and we can get more details around the implementation of that. And then I myself at the King County level am fighting for resources from COVID relief packages to disrupt violence on the ground.
Continue the work that you're doing. Well, I can speak for myself and say I'm happy to have you there.
Thank you so much, Tony. Be happy to have you there as well.
All right. I know you got to go, so I'll just let you go so you can just buzz out if you need to. Thank you. We actually went overtime.
Thanks, everybody.
County Councilmember Girmay Zahilay. And I'm not, this isn't against anyone. We should be able to ask questions. I can be questioned. So what this radio station is about, it's about opening the door for communication and sharing the narratives, amplifying the voices of our community. And so let your voice be heard. That's basically what it boils down to. Having said that, with the remaining time, one of the voices, at least as far as Rainier Avenue Radio is concerned, that it has been conspicuously absent is the voice of Councilmember Tammy Morales. I say that because we should be hearing Councilmember Morales' voice as well. We have requested Councilmember Morales to come on this show several times for a number of different reasons, to give us updates, to share with us what's been going on through this crisis, to let us know, what our elected official is doing, to let us know who our elected official is talking to let us know who our elected official is working with. And again, I applaud all of the groups who've stepped up during this pandemic to fill in that safety net. But we have elected officials. And I guess the question is, where is Tammy Morales? Maybe Councilmember Morales has been doing things on other networks. Maybe Councilmember Morales has been talking to people privately. Maybe Councilmember Morales has been talking to certain groups. But I know that we haven't had Councilmember Morales on this show in about 8 months. Maybe six to eight. It was after the gathering in the parking lot in Rainier Beach that was organized by community members to protest George Floyd's murder. There are a lot of different messages that went on there, but it was a phenomenal event, well attended by community members, peaceful, no problems. Councilmember Morales was not there, but did come on the phone. And I don't know, if the fact that I said, it was not supposed to be a hardball question. It was just, why should Black people trust you? Which I ask a lot of people. And then the answer was kind of political. And I said, that's not what I'm saying. And since then, now I don't know that was a trigger or whatever, but it shouldn't matter. I've asked Councilmember President Lorena Gonzalez to be on the show. She was on the show twice in 1 week. Again, I asked questions. I was clear that, I was speak to us as people, not as a politician. And I appreciate Councilmember Gonzalez coming on Rainier Avenue Radio and then coming on again to sit with us during the town hall meeting that was actually in Councilmember Tammy Morales' district, which again, I did get a message to say she was out of town. This was over Zoom, but it may have been a conflict there. So I know that Councilmember Morales isn't here. And this is just part of holding Councilmember Morales accountable. If you disagree with this, if you feel like, hey, Councilmember Morales has been, I want to call to support Councilmember Morales. These are the things that I have seen Councilmember Morales do over the course of the past year. Get in touch with me. I'll put you on the air. We'd like to know. I did see one propaganda piece where there was all this information as though all these amazing things have been done. If you're in the community, do you think this has been an amazing year? Do you think this has been an incredible year? Are you doing better? I'm not going to play that, what I'm calling a propaganda piece, because I'm not going to legitimize it. Because I think that in these times, our politicians should speak to the issues that are important to us, not try to politic us into thinking that we're doing better than we are. And I can't say that that was the reason behind it. I'm just saying that when I looked at it, it was a propaganda piece. And so here we have 5 minutes left. We spent 45 minutes with King County Councilmember Girmay Zahilay. And there's nobody here from City Council District 2. Where is Councilmember Morales? So if you know, and you have found Councilmember Morales more readily available than we have at Rainier Avenue Radio, then you can come on and talk with us. So the silence that you're hearing right now, this is the silence that Rainier Avenue Radio has been getting from Councilmember Morales to all of our requests to come on the show and be accountable to the community. Maybe we're not big enough. Maybe our reach isn't, mainstream media. Maybe we're not sensational enough. Maybe there's just a simple fact that we want to talk about issues that impact South Seattle and those nuanced issues, again, that are leading to some of the violence. Does it have to specifically be violence to get that happen? Maybe we can just talk about some of the things that are impacting people on the front lines, boots on the ground. Don't let anybody tell you you're not boots on the ground. If you live in the community and you get up and you go to work, you're boots on the ground. If you're raising a child in the community, you're boots on the ground. Let's not play wordsmithing games. Yes, there are people who do certain things, but everybody does certain things. And all of them are important and all of them are relevant. But some people have louder voice. I apparently have a louder voice because I do media. But you can do media. That was one of the things that I said, especially with the technology that we have available today. Everybody has a media. Everybody is a potential media content provider. We offered coursework in it at middle schools and high schools so that folks can amplify their voices. We have about 3 minutes left. Joining us will be Eugenie Jones. We're going to talk about Jackson Street Jazz Walk. And then also joining us a little later in the program will be the Inspector General for the City of Seattle. So we have 2 minutes left. So if anybody would like to help us get in touch with Councilmember Morales, we would appreciate it. We just want to hear what's going on. She's an elected official. And again, it's been a few months. And so if you think that what I'm saying and what I'm doing is improper, then let me know that. Say, hey, you shouldn't be, give this individual a chance to come on the air. Make sure, I've done that. And maybe you don't care if the person that you elected is unwilling to speak to you on Rainier Avenue Radio. You get to tell me that. You get to tell me it doesn't matter whether or not this individual who was elected comes to speak on Rainier Avenue Radio or not. But I also hear people saying there's no Black city council members, which was the question was, why should Black people trust you? I think it's a fair question. Whew, 1 minute left. You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. It's me, Tony B. This is our special Impacts of the Coronavirus show on South Seattle and surrounding communities that we do every Friday. Excited to be able to talk to Eugenie Jones. Oh, is that? That's council. Is that Councilmember Morales? Okay. That's Councilmember Morales. If you haven't seen her, this is what she looks like. We would like to have Councilmember Morales come on this show and talk to us and let us know how she's representing the community, what her perspectives are on the issues that are impacting the community, including the Rainier Beach violence, but also our arts communities. What's going on? Again, now there's money involved. Councilmember Girmay Zahilay told us there's a lot of money involved. And there's the Amazon tax. There's some things that we would like to know. I think that we should hold our elected officials accountable. If you think so, then help us out. And if you don't think so, then say, just leave it alone, because it's your vote and you get to use it however you want to. We'll be back to talk to Eugenie Jones, Jackson Street Jazz Walk, right after this.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not meeting Mrs. Jones in that cafe for a chat and nothing else, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
When feeling stressed, overwhelmed, or frustrated, what does self-care look like? It looks like doing something to clear your mind, such as meditating, painting, making a playlist, going outside. You can also stay connected with friends and loved ones. If you feel alone, look for an online community with shared interests or volunteer to help people in need. And use virtual sessions to talk with a mental health professional. They're here to help. If you need support, call the Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. Brought to you by the state of Washington.
This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio. Washington will focus its vaccination efforts on second doses, working to restore the balance between administering initial shots and reaching those who need to complete their full immunization course. According to the State Department of Health, healthcare providers requested 170,000 second doses for the week ahead, nearly twice the 92,325 allotted in federal shipments. As a result, the state will tap shipments meant for first doses to help make up the difference. Patch.com reports that there is a delay in vaccine deliveries due in part to President's Day and ongoing weather concerns in the state and across the United States. Officials said that their two issues together will make first dose appointments sparse, and some who already have appointments may be asked to reschedule. And that's your news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Women are not an homogenous group.
We face discrimination differently depending on factors such as ethnicity, age, socioeconomic status, and more.
Rainier Avenue Radio is proud to amplify women's voices.
They are the experts of their own lives, initiating conversations within their community about challenges they face, the solutions they're working on, and the opportunities they see.
Please join us this Sunday from 2 to 5 for Women's Voices on Air. We know our challenges. We are the experts of our lives.
We are master multitaskers, prioritizing our family, friends, and our faith above our own needs.
Our needs and voices are too often overlooked.
Please join us this Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. for Women's Voices on Air.
We tell our stories in our own way.
The 7th annual Jackson Street Jazz Walks virtual concert will be held February 27th and 28th at 7 p.m. It's free to the public, with all donations benefiting the Central Area Senior Center. Join us for the Delvon Lamar Organ Trio, Eugenie Jones, Alex Dugdale, the Devon and Donovan Lewis Drum-Off, and more. For more information, please visit jacksonstreetjazz.org. That's www.jacksonstreetjazz.org.
The Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, empowering communities and changing lives. The Urban League has been there to serve when our community is at its lowest. It's never mattered what the crisis was. The systemic oppression remains constant for those most vulnerable. Here at the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, we'll be temporarily adjusting our hours of operation and available services. If you are in need of resources, we recommend that you give us a call at 206-461-3792. To make an appointment, press 0 and speak with the receptionist. Walk-in hours will be from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. And hey, we'll gladly work with you via phone as best as we can if you're exhibiting any signs of illness, to assist you with information to save your home, find you a place to sleep, or connect you to job opportunities. The Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. That's 206-461-3792.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Ito po ang PhilAm Radio, programang Pilipino para sa mga Pilipino saan man kayo naroroon.
Phil-Am Radio tuwing Martes, 1:00 ng hapon, dito sa Seattle, Washington.
Pakinggan ninyo ang Phil-Am Radio sa internet, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. At kami po ang inyong mga lingkod, Kuya Bert Kawili, Emma Heron at
Manny Panganiban.
Phil-Am Radio.
This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio. Turkish police detained 718 people, including members of the pro-Kurdish political party, in operations against PKK militia, following the killing of 13 Turkish captives in northern Iraq, the Interior Ministry said. The Turkish government said that fighters from the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, had executed police and military personnel who had been mostly seized in 2015 and 2016. The killings took place during a military operation, Reuters reports. The people detained today in 40 provinces across the country included provincial and district chairs from the pro-Kurdish opposition People's Democratic Party, or HDP, Parliament's third largest, the ministry said. The political fallout could raise the stakes in what analysts say are efforts by President Erdogan's party to create a rift between opposition parties that cooperated in municipal elections in 2019 that handed him defeats. And that's your news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
When should you wear a mask? For almost everyone, every time you go out. Like for coffee, when you ride the bus, or head out to care for your parents. When you go to work, spend the afternoon at the park, or pick up some dinner on your way home. Whatever you do, wearing a mask is essential because it works to prevent the spread of COVID-19 and it helps keep Washington open. Mask up to open up, Washington. Coronavirus.wa.gov. This message brought to you by the state of Washington.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Welcome back to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. It's me, Tony B. This is our special impacts of the coronavirus on South Seattle and surrounding community show. If you're just tuning in, we just had a conversation with King County Councilmember Girmay Zahilay. He shared with us what his first year in office was like during a pandemic and a crisis. He also shared with us what he felt like were his three biggest successes this year, and kind of showed us his leadership style, which for him was being out there communicating and talking to people. There's a lot of leadership styles. That's one that he talked about that was important to him at that time. There's a lot of leadership styles. So maybe you might like one better than the other. There's still lots of leadership styles. So you had an opportunity to hear about Councilmember Zahilay's. And we're waiting on Eugenie Jones. I think we're having some technical issues, which happens occasionally. And so we'll try and get that worked out, get that figured out. At 2:30, Lisa Judge, who leads the Office of Inspector General, is going to be joining us, and we'll be talking to Lisa about what that means, what those duties are, how this impacts and affects our communities, what our communities, if anything, should look for from the Inspector General. That'll be at 2:30. And I want to remind everyone that tonight, our Black History Month, Call to Conscience, continues. Friday, as you know by now, or if you don't know, now you know, is Friday Family Film Night. And every Friday during Black History Month in February, we've played at Black films. We started this off with a Familiar Lie, which is a funny comedy, a little irreverent, by Curtis Ellerson. And we also saw One Vibe Experience by Simon Okelu. Had a conversation with both of them. That was the first Friday. Then the following week, we had the opportunity to talk to Seattle history maker and pioneer Aaron Dixon. And we watched his documentary film, My People Are Rising, which was based off of a book that he wrote, which is in, I think he said, mandatory reading in 17 different colleges and universities. And so if you missed it, was an amazing film, especially at the time of, I think they've just released, what is it called? Jesus and the about Fred Hampton. Don't remember the name, but you know the one I'm talking about. I just don't remember the name now. But if you enjoyed that film, this one is, you need to see My People Are Rising. It's not as available, but an amazing historical document of Aaron Dixon and his perspective, his views, starting this along with his brother Elmer, starting the first chapter of the Seattle Black Panther Party outside of Oakland, and his work as a captain for the Black Panther Party. We followed that up with the Black Remix. Black Remix tapes. Black Tape Remix. I think that's what it was called. The Black Tape Remix. Essentially what it was in the late 60s, early 70s, a group of Swedish photographers came to America to film what they called the Black Power Network, and interviewed a number of different folks involved at that time. Stokely Carmichael, Angela Davis, a number of different folks. Some names you may not even remember now, but at the time were prominent. And they went back to Sweden, and something happened, and these tapes were put in a bin and never used, and they were discovered or uncovered, depending on your viewpoint, 30 years later, and turned into a documentary film utilizing some of the voices of music today. And I think it's called the Black Tape Remix. Black Tape Remix, 1967 to 75. I think that's what it's called. And then the following week, we showed Sam Hampton's film, A Change in the Family, which again was a documentary following the life of Zoe and her family, as Zoe came out transgender and gender nonconforming. Now the family worked through that process and is working through that process, and now Zoe is still working through that process. A Change in the Family. And this Friday, Anthony Tackett is going to show us a couple of films. One is called Malik. It's again a short film, and it's about police brutality, young man. And he's going to show us a preview of a documentary that we're working on, called Black June, where during the riots in Seattle and the protests in Seattle and everything that was going on, the conversations, the music that was playing, the police using gas on folks, the community that on the one hand, for folks who live there, this just happened to them in their community, and they, had to deal with it. And for some folks, it was liberating and definitely got national attention. Anthony Hackett filmed a lot of that, and we're going to get a preview of this film called Black June. And joining us here now is Eugenie Jones. Hey, Eugenie.
You caught me. I was running off screen to go grab something and get back. Hi, Tony.
Hey, well, good to have you here. How are you?
Thank you.
How you doing?
Busier than a one-legged man in an alligator kicking contest.
we will accept that substitute. We know what you mean. We know what you mean. Well, I'm good. Excited that you're here, because I wanna share, Jackson Street Jazz Walk. And tell people what's going on. And so I did talk a little bit about the history of Jackson Street, and I'm hoping that I really wanted you to do that. So can you just talk about the history before we get into why it exists, of Jackson Street and the impact that I said globally?
Yes, I agree. So as many of your listeners already know, Jackson Street in the central Seattle district historically has been the birthplace and the proving ground for jazz for a number of people in our community. I don't know why my glasses are crooked. I'm just going to take them off and take the chance that I can't see you. What happened there was...
Most people say all you need to do is hear me anyway. That's why I do radio.
So as far back as we can date, 1918, when Miss Lillian Smith's band performed at the Washington Hall before an overwhelming audience, there has been a number of Black African-American artists who got their start and honed their skills in that area of Seattle. And primarily because of the red line districting that was happening at that time, they couldn't get work anyplace else. They couldn't play downtown, as the phrase goes. And so they created opportunities in the international district through restaurant owners who wanted to create these spaces for them to come in and present their music, drive their business as well. So it was a mutually beneficial relationship, and it allowed places like the Black and Tan to come into place. And we saw people like Ray Charles, Ernestine Anderson, Quincy Jones, Dave Lewis, and a plethora of other African-American artists who performed in that area and broke other boundaries as a result of their building their skill set. And they went from there internationally and across the world. And we all know what accomplishments these artists have achieved over their lifetime, and they're still accomplishing. So, but it began in this area of Seattle, and we want people to know that.
Awesome. Fantastic. And a lot of, maybe some of them weren't as international, some of the huge names that you're mentioning, but there was a whole lot of local talent here too. That
Absolutely.
was exceptional.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Just we have the pleasure of having Stephanie Johnson Tolliver coming from the Black Heritage Society, speaking during the Jazz Walk, and they chronicle all of this information with pictures and artifacts, and she's going to be there talking about this history. So if it's something that you want to learn more about, this is a perfect opportunity for you to do that.
Okay, now you said be there. We hadn't got there yet. It's virtual, or is this something that folks can attend? Is because you said be there. So how do we be there?
So you can be there by tuning in to our YouTube channel, which is Jackson Street Jazz on YouTube. Just Google that channel, and on that channel is where the broadcast will happen on Saturday night and Sunday night at 7 o'clock both evenings.
Okay, give us that information one more again, and it won't be the last time I ask you, but one more again.
One more again, okay. So someone's sharing our website, but if you go to the link that's on there, that'll take you directly to the YouTube channel. That's where we will stream from, is on our YouTube channel. So right now you're on the About Us page. You should go to the schedule page at the top, yeah, right there. And scroll down a little bit.
On top of it. Daniel's on top of it. You know,
that's right. Click right where it says click. There you go. Thank you so much. And there's our YouTube channel. That's a promo video that we've been sharing across all media that we possibly can. And this is exactly where. Yeah, go ahead, play it.
Daniel, let's take a look at that. Can you turn it up a little bit?
Hey brother, hey, come over here, throw that bebop rhythm our way. You can't cross that red line to play downtown. The Black and Tan is Emerald City's hot stage. Quincy and Ray play every act of the stage, while Ernestine sings her heart with style and grace. And the jams they go, and the jams they go, and the jams they go on all night. No matter how dark your skin, you can step into this light. Hey, brothers, hey, hey, I'm talking to you. Don't you dare give up on your dreams, no matter, no way. Gatekeepers slam doors in your face, but God's gonna bust open another in its place. So come on, add to this legacy. With the creators at the root of it, Louis there for all to see. Sunrise, sunrise, sunset, but we're still giving our best. As long as we can play, and son, you can play. Hey, hey, you can play. Unfortunately, Fever's little Willie won't be in the place. And the jams they go, and the jams they go, and the jams they go on all night. No matter how dark your skin, you can step into this light. Hey, 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 brothers, hey, brothers, hey, hey, hey.
All right. All right. Who was the vocalist?
Who
was
that was me. Yeah. I was inspired to write that song a couple years ago, and knowing about the history of that area, and so if you listen to the words carefully, it's talking about history, but it's also at the end of the song it says that red line's still there after all this time. So it's a little bit more clandestine, but as an African-American artist, we're continually having to contend with our right to be heard and seen equally in this marketplace. And so this song, it was originally written, I was imagining a sage old woman in church sitting at the pew saying, "Come over here, son, let me talk to you," you know, and having a conversation with a young man. That's what I was imagining when I wrote this song, because that's what we need, is encouragement to keep staying in there and doing this fight that we're doing in order to be able to share our craft.
And I mentioned that, you know, because I knew it was you as soon as I heard the voice thing. But this is an example of the type of talent that we have here. And that was beautiful, by the way. It was really,
Thank
really
you.
awesome. And you're performing too, right?
Yep, I'm one of a number of wonderful performers that you saw in that video just now.
Okay, so obviously one of the things that I was going to have you do was talk about the performers, and we don't have as much time as I was going to talk about. So I'm going to let you go first, and let's talk about Eugenie Jones, the performer. You're performing. We're going to talk about the other performers too. When, what time, where? Don't worry about it. Just be. This is shameless self-promotion. That's why I said, who sang that song?
Yeah. So just so you know, I have an undergrad and graduate degree in marketing. I have no shame in promoting anything. But so I am a singer, songwriter, producer, and I will be at the show as a performer. But I'm also the executive producer for the Jackson Street Jazz Walk. And I went out and hustled to get sponsorships by a number of different organizations. And those financial sponsorships enabled us to hire these artists to give them work, paying work, as well as have an opportunity to share the history of African Americans in Seattle. And also, we are collecting funds, donations that will be donated to the Central Area Senior Center's meal delivery program. So when it says join the movement, music, community, legacy, that is the mission of this Jazz Walk, and what I really was inspired to try and do as its producer. And so I am performing. I'm a singer, songwriter. I have internationally ranked CDs out there in the market. Just Google my name and you can hear me sing. But more importantly, I am a person that believes in community and opportunities and creating your own opportunities, not waiting for someone else to do it for you.
And you know, it's difficult to juggle those things when you're a performer, but you're also a community impactful person. You know, sometimes people get to do one or the other, you know, not both. And so that's why I'm stressing now. Tell us about Eugenie the singer too, because we're gonna. So what time, where, when? You know, oh, I guess we know where, but when and what time and all that goodness.
So my performance will be Friday evening. The headliner is Delvon Lamar Organ Trio. They'll be up first in terms of performances, and I will follow their performance. But the evening will start with an interview with Diane Ferguson. I will be interviewing Diane Ferguson, the executive director of the Central Area Senior Center. And from there, we'll segue right into the first performance, Delvon Lamar, and from there, Eugenie Jones. And it continues for an hour and a half. Night one, and then night two, another hour and a half.
I'm just going to give a quick shout out to Diane Ferguson and the work that she's doing in the community regarding vaccine dissemination for our Black elders. Anyway, I just had to sneak that in there too. So you keep going though. Tell us more about the 27th and 28th. And
right.
You talk. I don't talk.
So this right now, who's your background person helping you? Your tech person.
That is
kudos.
That is a super producer, D Money.
Okay, D Money, you are on the job. So this is our website, and D, can you scroll up there? People can see it's jacksonstreetjazz.org. This is our website. It has the dates and the information, and the website design was yours truly. Since we're plugging, Bright Ideas Marketing is a side business for me. I do all this kind of stuff, poster design and everything, and pushing information out to get it circulated to the right folks. And so this basically shows you what our lineup is and how this is going to come off Friday night. Not Friday night, we'll be pushing for interviews and talking, but Saturday is the show and Sunday is the show. 7 o'clock both nights. Just come to our website and where it says click here to watch, jump on and listen to some fabulous music, listen to some information about our history, and also listen to a great community activist in the person of Diane Ferguson, who works for the Senior Center.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio World. It's me, your host, Tony B. This is our special broadcast of the impacts of the coronavirus on South Seattle and surrounding communities. And again, it's virtual this year. So let's talk about that. Organizing the Jackson Street Walk during a pandemic. It's called the walk because people can walk and interact and walk the strip. It's going to be a little bit about organizing that this year, and what you thought. What were some of the challenges, and just putting that together during a pandemic.
So it is a bit of a misnomer calling it a walk, and we're not walking very far. In the past, we've had performances up and down Jackson at various venues, restaurants, and people were able to just float from place to place and see fabulous music. And COVID just killed that idea for this year. And what we did instead was to basically present a broadcast of the Jazz Walk, all being shot at Langston Hughes Performing Arts Center. We thank them for their support. And HCAACD was our sponsor for being able to use that space. We went in there, we had 2 days of videotaping, one right after the other, and we pulled this all together for this performance that will air starting tomorrow night. So it's been very challenging just trying to organize all those pieces. Anybody that knows project management, this kind of event is exactly that. It's just a million balls in the air. We had a few good volunteers who worked with us, Ruby Love, Maurice James, and Benita Thomas, Ilza Gideons, and all of those folks were there helping with the logistics of making this video possible. We wanted to try and do it. And initially, I just kind of thought, well, let me give it a try and see if this might work. But then every piece just kept happening and falling into place that I pursued. And so it came together. And here we are, talking to Tony B.
And we are celebrating Black History Month all month long here on Rainier Avenue Radio World. Again, Eugenie, I asked this question of everyone, and there are a lot of different perspectives on it, about Black History Month. And some folks say it should be all year round. Some folks have their perspectives on it. Some folks say, I don't really think about it because for me, it's irrelevant. For you, again, Just some background. This started in 1926 because Carter G. Woodson did not find information on African Americans who had contributed to our history and thought that that was critical and important. What started out as Negro History Week in 1976 turned into Black History Month, a time to acknowledge and celebrate and a number of different things you can do. So on Rainier Avenue Radio, what we felt what we would do would just give folks a holistic, comprehensive Black experience because we're not one monolithic thing. Yes, we also covered slavery. We also covered civil rights. So here comes the question. What does Black History Month mean to you?
I think this is a month that I have grown up with where there was an intense focus on our history as opposed to no focus to full focus. We are focused on our history because we're living it every day. History is a living, breathing thing. We're creating it every day. I really liked John Gilbreth's article in Earshot magazine. He did an editor's note in Earshot, and he spoke to this, is that history is past, but it's also present. And that's what I would like for people to feel and experience, to be cognizant of your present tense, that you are making history right here, right now. So every gain that you make is a historical stamp left behind for someone else to look back on years later. And you can inspire and inform people by creating those stamps in time. But don't just look at the past and say, oh, that was wonderful. Ask yourself, what am I doing to contribute to the African American history of our people? And answer that in an affirmative way. Get out there and do something, be something, share something, tell a story. Because you remember the stories in Alex Root when he did Roots. Alex Haley, when he wrote the book Roots, he talked about how he first found out and made the connection to Mother Africa was when he sat around circles where they tell the story of their tribe. And they told stories down through history until he got to the point where he heard his name and he recognized and knew that he was where he belonged. Stories have to be told and retold and retold and retold so that people don't forget them and so that people can realize how important they are to be added to.
We have about 30 seconds left, but I want to give you an opportunity for final words here, about 30 seconds. Definitely give us that for YouTube, that information again, but whatever you want to say, Eugenie.
So I would encourage people to come out and participate. This is an event for our community focusing on African Americans. So I want to see a lot of African Americans participating, watching the show, listening to the music, posting comments, and making a donation to the Central Area Senior Center's meal delivery program. We're not charging admission in lieu of people making donations to this program. They are reaching out to homebound seniors, and we want to help them in that effort, as well as share great music with you. So come on out and join us and support us in this effort.
Hey, Eugenie, I know everybody's busy, but this has also been cool to catch up with you.
Thank you, Tony.
And thanks for the
I appreciate the invitation. Go to the YouTube channel, look up Jackson Street Jazz. It's easy, people. No technology involved. You just click go.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Coming up next, we'll have Lisa Judge, Office of the Inspector General. We'll find out more about what that means, what she does, how that impacts and affects our communities. Right after this.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not shouting "Badia" at city council meetings, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
My name is BK, International Talent Scout. I'm bringing a brand new show to you called BK Presents. 30 minutes, non-stop, your favorite in gospel music. The studio session, going deep into interviews with your favorite artists, producers, and their engineers. You and your music. Concert previews and concert reviews. Get it all on BKPresents.com. Here we go.
This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio. A Washington State Trooper's 2018 death has been reclassified as occurring in the line of duty after an investigation determined her fatal cancer was caused by exposure to toxic chemicals during an illegal auto wrecking investigation. Per Como News, Trooper S. Renee Padgett was 50 years old when she died on September 4th, 2018, after a long battle with multiple myeloma, a rare cancer of the white blood cells. Her uniformed colleagues held donor drives in Bellevue, Olympia, and Spokane. Many soldiers at Joint Base Lewis McChord also volunteered to see if they were a match. Paget also received support from unlikely allies in the Pierce County Jail, where about 40 inmates volunteered to be tested to see if they were a match. Paget was a trooper for 27 years, working first in Gig Harbor, then in Bellevue, where she was a wrecking yard trooper. They inspected wrecking yards, scrap processors, and hull haulers.
Rainier Avenue Radio. On Saturday, February 27th, Seattle Local Learning Center, a nonprofit, A for Apple Learning Center, will spread the warmth by giving away new winter coats and books to children. We know that warmth is created in more than one way. A warm coat brings physical warmth, the gift of community brings warmth to our spirit, and the knowledge that someone cares brings warmth to the heart. A for Apple Learning Center has served the community for over 25 years and is dedicated to supporting and connecting families to essential resources in our community.
Rainier Avenue Radio, your community radio station will provide you with more information. Rainier Avenue Radio.
Welcome back to Rainier Avenue Radio .world. It's me, Tony B. This is our special broadcast every Friday that we do on the impacts of the coronavirus on South Seattle and surrounding communities. Again, we started doing this on March 13th. And I don't see any signs of us discontinuing this special broadcast anytime soon. Well, if you're just tuning in earlier on the program, we had King County Councilmember Girmay Zahilay, and we talked to him about how his first year as an elected official is, but how the first year was during a pandemic and a crisis, and also shared information about what he thought were his most significant accomplishments. And then, yes, we also talked about the issue about the violence in Rainier Beach in the Safeway parking lot and accountability for our elected officials. Still trying to get in touch with Councilmember Morales. We're not going to stop. We're not going to stop asking. We just finished talking with Eugenie Jones about the Jackson Street Jazz Walk and learned a little bit more about the history of jazz in Seattle. And again, just from Seattle to the rest of the world is the impact that Jackson Street had as far as music was concerned. Joining me now is Lisa Judge. Lisa, how are you?
I'm doing well. I got a little bit of a frog in my throat today. Something's going on, but otherwise doing really good. Thank you very much, Tony, for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. And I'm trying to figure out which order to do this, because when I say Inspector General, I don't know that everybody or most people are going to have any idea what I'm talking about.
Sure.
And this role. But I also want to ask you about your background. And I'm trying to see, is it, which came first, the chicken or the egg? So I figure what I'm going to do is I'm going to give some information on your background that I have here, and then we can find out what this means, what this is. So Lisa Judge leads the Office of Inspector General. For the past 2 years, she's built a department dedicated to critically examining Seattle Police Department use of force and improving its policies, practices, and culture. Her works in progress geared towards institutional changes include community involvement sentinel event review of significant use of force events, recommending an officer peer intervention program, and developing an innovative training program with oversight partners and SPD for effective suspect and witness interviewing, inspired by concerns of organizations like the Innocence Project. Lisa spent over 23 years as a Tucson city attorney and in-house counsel for the Tucson Police Department, guiding police management in constitutional policing. Lisa was an ACLU-approved trainer for court-ordered training on Fourth Amendment law and anti-bias for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. Lisa earned her Juris Doctor from the University of Arizona. She and her wife, Kimberly, enjoy spending time with their son and furry kids. So that's your background. I know it's not a complete background, but did that work? That's the info. Is there something else you want to share about your background?
No, I think that takes care of it. I think you have a general sense of where I come from and what I come from. So, to answer your chicken and egg question, I guess the chicken came first, right? In terms of what an inspector general does, I wasn't traditionally an inspector general. I worked in a law enforcement department as a lawyer, trying to make sure that they were properly trained, that they had sound policies, and that they had someone paying attention to what they were doing and trying to keep them on the right track of providing constitutional policing. So this office was only created in 2017 by the Seattle City Council. It was an outgrowth of things that happened during this consent decree period that Seattle finds itself in. One of those was the creation before us of the Community Police Commission, and then some formalizing of the Office of Police Accountability. So essentially in 2017, the city of Seattle adopted an ordinance that established those three offices and set us up as, I've heard us described as the three-legged stool of accountability here in Seattle. So we all have distinct functions. And when this opportunity came up, I was not, I was kind of talked into applying for this because I had done this type of work, on a much smaller scale in a law enforcement agency, trying to make sure that they were on the right track and doing the right things. And so it really became an opportunity to come to a place where the community is more engaged, I think, than any community I've been familiar with, and to do what I feel is important and critical work for communities, to make sure that law enforcement is responsive to what communities want and that they are doing their jobs and their functions in a way that respects the Constitution and respects what community wants. So kind of in a nutshell, that's what brought me here, and that's kind of the philosophy of what I was trying to bring to the job. That said, I had no idea what an inspector general really did, because I didn't do that in my former life. And so I've had a pretty big learning curve in the last 2.5, almost 3 years in standing up this brand new office, and really figuring out how we get into SPD and look under the hood or turn over the rocks, whatever analogy you want to use, for how they do business, using audits, having people who are experts in policy and statistical analysis, and having folks who can do investigations and keep an eye on OPA functions, because we also have an obligation under that ordinance that I mentioned to audit the Office of Police Accountability and make sure that they're doing things in a way that's thorough and unbiased and timely.
And the initial thing, and if this is offensive, I don't mean to be, but for a lot of folks, this is going to just sound like another bureaucratic wasteland. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
When we're out here dealing with issues and problems and things on a grassroots level, on a race level, and we have, and you mentioned before, and I'm going to try to remember this alphabet soup of. So we have the Office of Police Accountability, and then what is it? The Citizens Police Commission?
The Community Police Commission, yeah.
Community Police Commission, and the Office of the Inspector General. What is the difference, if you can? And I know you're not the other two, but if you can kind of separate the difference between the three for us, so that we can get a better idea when you say three-legged stool, what sits at the top of these legs?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. SPD is at the top, right? And probably I would say community is at the top. So we were designed as a accountability structure to have separate but overlapping functions. So the Office of Police Accountability is the office that's tasked with investigating individual officer misconduct. So, officers who are alleged to have violated policy or engaged in some sort of unprofessionalism or wrongdoing, those cases go to the OPA. The OPA is responsible for those, for misconduct, essentially. The Community Police Commission was established and envisioned to make sure that these accountability processes that we have and
So is that on an individual level? Is that on a group level? Is that's if one officer or two officers do something, that's OPA says we're going to deal specifically with what you officer or officers have done. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes, it's the fault finding arm of accountability, the individual accountability piece. So if an officer has used excessive force or has been, has lied in an investigation or something like that, it's OPA's responsibility to investigate that allegation, reach findings about it, findings of fact, and then make recommendations to the chief of police about what they should do in terms of discipline. So that's all about individual officer accountability. And it may be groups of officers, but it's about holding them accountable for misconduct.
Okay.
That
OPA.
helps. Yeah.
And CPC, which is Community Policing Commission?
Yes, sir.
Right? Okay. And they do what specifically, if you can, so that we can understand?
Sure. Yeah, they're particularly tasked with being the voice of community and providing a feedback loop between community and the policing structure. Us accountability partners and the Seattle Police Department. So they have specific tasks involving looking at SPD policy, making sure that policy concerns reflect community input, and really that the way SPD does business is properly infused by community concern and regard. So they're really intended to be, for lack of a better way to characterize it, the voice of community. But as we know, in a city as diverse as Seattle, really hard to do that with one office. And so all of the three of us have, I think, independent obligations to get out and explain what we do and engage with community and make sure that our own work is reflecting what community wants, what they feel like they need.
And again, now just to follow up again, your role in all of this is Seattle Inspector General. You look at systemic change, you look at, I don't want to say big picture stuff because it's maybe all big picture stuff, but I'm just trying to make this again in a way that we can easily understand what it is that out of this office of the Seattle Inspector General. Can you break that down so it makes sense?
Yeah, I think big picture stuff is a really accurate way to explain it. We look at the systems that SPD has to make sure that they are operating in a way that is responsive to what community wants, is responsive to concerns, that their policies are appropriate, that they have adequate supervision going on of how they do business, that their training is appropriate, all of those bigger systemic things that kind of contribute to how each individual officer goes about their day. They don't just show up in a vacuum and do things because they've decided to do that or because they've trained themselves. They're a part of a bigger system that has huge impacts on how they do their jobs. And so our focus is on looking at those larger systems to make sure that they are the way the community of Seattle wants them to be, and that they support officers in going out and doing the job in the way that community wants them to. And I don't know if that
I think so.
was
If anybody
lofty,
if anybody has a question, just get back to me and we'll try and get that cleared up for you. Are there inspector generals in most large cities?
Large cities, yes. When I first started this job, I made it my job to kind of survey other cities that had this kind of function and get to know some of those folks and how they ran their offices so that we could build the best one that we could for Seattle. And so you'll find inspectors general in places like Los Angeles. They've got one for the city and the county police departments there. You'll find them in the largest cities in California, New York, Chicago. Nashville has a fairly robust accountability system. But the thing that's unique about the Seattle Office of Inspector General is that we have been given incredibly broad access to SPD. So the collective bargaining agreement with SPOG says it characterizes the access that we have as full and unfettered access. So we don't have to, like many organizations who have inspector generals, they've got to ask law enforcement departments for data. They have to ask them for reports. They have to rely on cooperation in obtaining the kind of information that they need to really go in and take a hard look at a law enforcement agency. We don't have to do that. We have access to all of the systems and the information and data that SPD keeps. So it makes our job a lot easier when we want to go in and do some look at an issue with SPD that we don't have to rely on their permission.
And thank you for that. And I just kind of wanted to add some context to the conversation because I think that was important. Obviously, I had a zillion questions, but if we don't provide some background first, so now to where we are now. So then you have a pandemic, and then you have social unrest and civil unrest, and defund the police becomes a catchphrase. Everybody becomes aware of what that wasn't like that. Then now, boom, and then you see images of police, pepper spraying and kids and what type of force should be used. And then you've got people in the community who saying, we want our home back. We can't go there, and we pay taxes and people are living in a park that we can't. So all this stuff, and what a matter for us, the police, station was taken. Whew.
You've just described why I can't sleep at night.
How does this, and just let us know, how does this impact what you do? Where do you fit into all this? Because we hear about all these things, and now there's a Seattle Inspector General. Again, seems like another bureaucratic wasteland, but these are bigger picture things, I would think.
Absolutely.
What have you done? Has it changed the way that you work? Are there updates that you can give us about anything that involves the police department? Because we've heard about it in a lot of different, but let's hear about it from your viewpoint.
Yeah, yes, and yes, and yes is the answer to all of those questions. So I'll start a little bit I'll go chronologically with COVID. We had really just gotten about a year's worth of real work under our belt when COVID hit. And so we had, a little bit of body of work that we had started. And then we had a really ambitious work plan for last year that was going to, in a lot of ways, support what the monitor was doing and what the federal court is doing. We had audits planned for SPD's discipline process and for their supervision, especially command level supervision. We were going to get in there and try to look at whether that's performing effectively and up to kind of snuff in terms of community concern. So we had a lot of ambitious projects, and then COVID came and we had to start working remotely. And, fortunately, a lot of our work we can do with computers and with Zoom meetings with SPD and data, but it really made the engagement part of our work, going out, meeting with stakeholders, doing things like this, engaging with community members. It made that impossible to go out to community meetings or have sort of broader reach for what we wanted to do. So we spent a couple of months kind of rethinking how we could best, keep infusing the human aspect of this work into our work product and our work processes. And then, George Floyd was murdered in May, and that completely put a different emphasis on the work that we needed to do in community. So I've been a big believer in my former role and when I came here in making sure that you have processes that have community members involved in them. Where I came from, fortunately, I worked with a police department with some chiefs who weren't afraid of community and weren't afraid of community involvement. So when the agency that I worked with had an officer involved shooting, we had a review panel that had community members on it, because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that when police review their own force, they have certain questions that are important to them that they want to ask, they want to answer, but they don't perhaps think about those broader questions that that people out in community have about why did this have to happen? Are there better ways to do things? Can you think about the necessity to use force or what led up to that differently? Because the questions you have are different. And so I was committed to bringing that kind of process here to Seattle. And when the protests began happening and SPD was responding in ways that really made community angry and sort of changed the tenor of protests here, it became really clear to me that we needed to create that kind of process for how we reviewed and looked at SPD's protest response.
Can your office actually do anything? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Can
it's a great
you
question.
actually do anything, or do you just look at things?
Well, we look at things. We try to figure out root causes of things, and if you look at a negative event, right, or a harmful event, let's look at some community harm, like an officer-involved shooting.
Okay, go ahead. I was going to say a lot of things go on in Rainier Beach. We can talk specifically about Rainier Beach. And that would be a community of our concern, so we don't have to be hypothetical about it in that regard. But I don't know if there are incidents that you're aware of or how you're fitting into that. But that would be something that our community would like to know. There were shell casings, I think, out of 180, 100 of them have been in the parking lot at Rainier Beach. I think that's kind of relevant, but I don't know if that's where you engage or. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's totally relevant, because I think all of the work that all of us do in the policing realm here in Seattle has to, in some way, be geared toward responding to what community wants. And I think that's been a real failing of government in general, law enforcement in particular, in terms of not talking with the people where they're having an impact and working together to problem solve, to figure out how those communities want that service, or if they want that service, right? I know that the pole cameras that were put up in shopping center parking lots were a really big issue. I think some of the last community meetings that I was able to attend involved people coming out to talk about that, and some real anger and concern on many sides of that issue. But I think for me, the systemic issue there, and one that we could get into, but was really a failing on the part of SPD to come out and genuinely and authentically engage with those community members and those communities to say, hey, we hear your concern about this problem. Let's work together to figure out what the best way to attack that problem is, and not just to come in with a strategy that made sense to SPD without at least talking it through with the impacted community and seeing if people are going in the right direction, or at least having a conversation about it. So I think
and that's something that you would review.
We might take a look at how effective SPD's engagement is. Just as a general matter. I mean, I think some of the work that we do is with best practices and recommendations for how they can better perform their functions, and so these might be more policy conversations with the chief and leadership, and about how they engage with the community, about not having it just be siloed, like not having a unit that does community engagement, but maybe acknowledging that every officer who's out there and interacting with anybody in community is doing community engagement, whatever they're doing, and it's either good or it's bad. And so, those are kind of the broader concepts that we might talk about with SPD, and work to have programs about maybe, strengthening community policing training or opportunities, things like that are bigger picture, but that impact how they go out and do what they do in community.
So who do you report to?
I report to you. I was appointed by the Seattle City Council, and so the people that I report to are elected officials.
But you know what I mean.
Represent the community.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're part of the legislative branch of the Seattle government, so part of the council branch. But we were set up to be independent. So I really don't report to anybody other than council members and to community. So I don't report to the mayor. That we were set up intentionally to be independent so that we could figure out the best ways to do this work to be the most impactful without having to try to navigate politics and things like that.
So how do you work with the city council? You work with them. You report. You don't report to them. So how do you work? Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
If you don't report to them, if they're not your boss, do they make recommendations to you? Do they have the ability to say, we don't agree with the way you're doing your work? How do you work with city council? Do they tell you this is what we would like you to focus on?
Yeah, and I do report to them. They, in a broader sense, they are my boss, but they're my boss as a reflection of the community concerns that they represent. So I do report to council, and I'm required by the ordinance to come and give, periodic reports about things to them. We reach out to council and to other stakeholders when we're trying to put together our work plan for the year. And as we move through projects, we routinely meet with them to, make sure that what we're doing is responsive to what they and their constituents see as concerns. You may recall last summer when council was considering the less lethal weapons ban ordinance, my office was called upon. We issued 2 reports in that circumstance. The first one to kind of educate folks on what kinds of weapons were used and how. And the other one later in the summer was recommendations about whether they should be used and when and whether limits should be placed on that. So we do assist council with research and recommendations when they make that request. And then council, like everybody else whose input we value, we routinely consult with them and they have input into our work plan. But I and my office get to decide what work we do, which gives us the ability to be a little bit more flexible and responsive when things come up, like the protests last summer.
And, I just wanted to give people kind of an overview of this Inspector General and the role that you play, because we're almost out of time. But I think that we got an overview. We could talk a lot more specific. But thank you for joining me. And I only got about 30 seconds, a minute left. But I want to give you the opportunity for final words. If there is something that you would like to share with the community right now as the Seattle Inspector General.
I think what I would really like to share is I understand that trust between community and government is at an all-time low. And so, I understand that this could be viewed as just another way to add layers and layers of bureaucracy onto work. But my office and I am really committed to doing work that has real impact and meaning. So I would encourage folks to look at our website, to reach out, to make contact. I've been coming down to your neighborhood to just meet with people and chat with them and try to get a sense of what you're concerned with and to let folks understand what we're doing. So I just would welcome any sort of feedback loop and, the opportunity to hear from people.
Well, you know what? All right. The next time we have a town hall meeting, I'll invite you.
All right. That sounds great. Thank you very much, Tony. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you for joining us. We went a little bit over time. Again, my guest, Lisa Judge, Seattle Inspector General. Don't forget that tonight is Family Film Night. As we wind down our Black History Month, we'll have a panel discussion on racial equity in the Seattle film industry. This is going to be moderated by Anthony Tackett of Abstract Media. He'll be joined by Virginia Bogart from Laughing Day Pictures, Curtis Ellerson from One Shot Films, Winfield Ezell Jr. from Obsidian, also Vivian Waugh from the Northwest Film Forum, Chris Swenson from City Seattle of Office of Music, Art and Music, and Cleve Legend, Cleve Tyson. What does it say here? North 182nd LLC. Okay, Cleve, but I just call him Cleve Legend. You don't want to miss that conversation. Tune in and check it out. And then following that, we're going to be showing you Black June, which was a film that is in the works by Anthony Tackett about that civil unrest, that social unrest that took place in June following George Floyd's murder. He filmed it, and he's in the process of putting together a documentary, and he's going to give us a preview of what that looks like. That's later on tonight. That's it. That's all the time that I have. That's going to do it for the kid. Until next week, remember, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you are probably right. I'm out. Peace.